Thank you so much for joining us today. For an exclusive in the studio, we speak to our special guest, Northern Land Council CEO, Marion Scrymgour. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me, Caleb.
We're here to discuss a very important thing that the Northern Land Council has very recently released a statement about, that being the Blue Mud Bay, the things that are going on there, especially for fishing and registration, which are very important for people.
It's been a long time coming. 2008, the High Court ruled a historic ruling which gave Aboriginal people rights to their sea. So all of the intertidal zone, over 8,000 square kilometres of water in the Northern Territory, is now owned by Aboriginal people. The Northern Land Council has been working since 2008 with traditional owners, but also the Northern Territory Government and the Commonwealth to have a look at resolving some of the issues and clarifying, particularly for and on behalf of traditional owners about how they want to proceed with, looking at their livelihoods in that intertidal zone. So that's taken us to today, where we've spent nearly 3 years talking to traditional owners, ramping up those discussions and getting very clear instructions as to what do Aboriginal traditional owners want in those waters.
Well, I think that's a very good area to just go straight into. What do Aboriginal traditional owners want?
I think that, for traditional owners, they've said to us very clearly, a lot of them have said, no, we want more time to think about this. We want Northern Land Council to provide a map going forward about plans of management and how we're going to manage our waters, but also what benefit is there for us? How can we look at going forward in terms of the importance for not just us now, but for our children going forward? And it's not just about commercial fishery, it's looking at aquaculture and looking at all of the other possibilities that could happen in their water. So these things take some time. We've been working with those traditional owners, with government. We've now got everyone at the table and focused on this issue. But part of moving forward, of course, you're not going to make everyone happy. That's part of this process where we think the Northern Land Council, on behalf of traditional owners, we've struck a fair balance between the need of traditional owners, which is what our primary responsibility is, and what fishermen in the Northern Territory feel is their right to be able to go and fish. And so we're trying to get a balance here and allow people to still have access to those waters, at the same time balancing the need of traditional owners to look at their livelihoods and what do they want to do with their water going forward.
So regarding the backlash, it's mostly been about this registration process and the misconception of what it is.
I think that if we had implemented, which is legally our right, to implement a permit system in that intertidal zone, that would have inflamed people even more. That is the right of traditional owners to look at that. However, the Northern Land Council has worked very closely with AFANT. We've had discussions with traditional owners, and we think that the balance in all of this is to come up with a simple registration process. It's one-off. You just have to register once, put your details in the system, and you will get a document that gives you a 2-year access permit-free into those waters.
For the actual registration, what is the purpose of it? I think that's one of the things that people out there are trying to figure out is what's the point of even registering if it's going to be permit-free anyway?
Look, it's protection for people, and it's to make sure that we can monitor and have a look at who is going into those areas. People have also brought up the issue of compliance, and I think that common sense has to prevail here, that the law of the land, even though it's in remote communities, people have to be mindful that you don't get tanked full of grog and go into these areas and think that you're going to, just continue the same behaviour. I think most fishermen do the right thing. And if you're doing the right thing, the registration process shouldn't be an issue. So we're asking people, look, just do a simple registration process. It is about safety. And, since COVID, that's what everyone seems to have forgotten. So since COVID, Aboriginal traditional owners want to know who's going in on their country. So we need to keep an eye on that we are tracking and making sure that people are doing the right thing, and to work with us to make this system work. It will only work if we're all working together to make it work.
I think that's important. Now, you mentioned that the registrations are only going to be there for 2 years. What happens in 2 years?
This will be up to traditional owners. It's not up to the Northern Land Council. The Northern Land Council acts for and on behalf of traditional owners. And whatever happens, we will make sure that we're consulting and we're talking to people way before 2022. That is our responsibility. It is an obligation that we've taken quite seriously, but we will talk to people. But I just think that if it works over these next 2 years, there's nothing stopping traditional owners from extending this beyond 2022. And that's what we all need to focus on. Let's all do the right thing. Let's all abide by the law. Let's all enjoy our fishing. And let's all respect that traditional owners have been the most generous and given a lot of concessions in terms of, yes, they haven't required a permit, but they have said put a registration process in place, and that's what we're doing.
I think it's also the strange mentality that because it's from an Aboriginal perspective that it doesn't apply to a lot of people. But if you look at things like military areas being set up or mining, people obey the laws. But for things like this, they kind of just throw their hands up in the air and say it should be fine for them.
And you can go to any pastoral property in the Northern Territory and pastoralists have signs on their gates. You cannot go into anybody's private land and do what you want to do. And that's what people seem to have forgotten here. And I think that message needs to be heard loud and clear, that it is private land and the landowners are saying you will register. It won't cost you anything, but you will register and you get 2 years free access. I don't see what the problem is, but, I act on behalf of those traditional owners and I have to make sure that it happens.
I understand. Another thing that has come to our attention from the map that the NLC has supplied for the area that's going to be available was that some areas of the Kakadu and Arnhem Coast have no permits.
No, Kakadu is under the Director of National Parks. That's a completely separate regime. So because the land is leased to the Director of National Parks, he will determine whether he issues a permit or whether he just allows people access in.
Okay. So this has been a huge thing. The amount of land is incredibly large, 3,000 kilometres, and then stretching further out to sea. What is the Aboriginal people and the traditional owners with those areas? What do they reckon about this?
That Aboriginal livelihoods is really important here, and that traditional owners also want a say in all of this. They want to develop enterprises just like everybody else. And so they want a balance between what their need is and developing enterprises to also making sure that people can access their water. It's a small price to register and it's one-off. That's what people need to understand. You don't have to register every time you go out. It's a one-off registration and you get 2 years.
Has there been any backlash about this whole setup from any of the traditional owners or
not everyone's happy, and kind of we understand that. We've got areas where we've got a very clear no from traditional owners, and we're working through with them. That's their right to say no, and Northern Land Council needs to continue to work with those traditional owners about why they're saying no, and how do we look at going forward with that. Now, that might not change, and people may continue to say no, and they may say to the Northern Land Council, we're saying no to you, but we want to be able to talk directly to those businesses and those operators directly. Northern Land Council, because of the Land Rights Act, still has a role in which to facilitate that. So, look, there's a whole lot of views out there. It's not just fishermen being, not happy. We're also got disputes amongst various Aboriginal groups, and the Northern Land Council has to work through a lot of that.
And yes, is there any fear of overfishing from people currently? Because you said there's been a new area of land and sea opened up for just anyone to go fishing. Is there any fear of people overfishing?
A lot of the plan of management and a lot of the work that we're putting in place is to make sure that the science is applied and that fishing stocks aren't depleted. And that's important because, water is life and fish is life as well. I mean, we need to make sure that we're not depleting fish stocks from certain areas. And that's why we're looking at particularly the hotspot areas where people are going. If we can look at those numbers and track that, then we can start getting some good science and get some good information out of those areas so that we can look at the fishing stocks and what's been removed. At the moment, there is no information, and that's what we need to do. I think it's really important that people realise that, Aboriginal traditional owners, for the first time in a long time, are exercising their right. And, they have every right to say who comes and goes on their land. And I think that they're being generous. That hasn't been appreciated in all of this. And I just hope that we can all work together to try and get a good outcome for everybody.
Well, that's, I think, a great message. And thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you, Caleb.